So Prince William just blocked Queen Camilla from pulling off the most audacious move in modern royal history. And when he found out the full extent of what she'd been building quietly, patiently, over the course of nearly a decade, he didn't negotiate. He didn't call a meeting. He didn't give anyone a warning. He just shut the whole thing down. And the way he did it? That's the part that tells you exactly who this man is. Before we get into all of it, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss updates, as more details keep coming out. There is a lot more to this story. Alright, let's start where the story actually begins. In January 2025, William quietly issued an instruction through his household. Tom Parker Bowles, Camilla's son, would not be appearing at Sandringham. Not now. Not going forward. The Sandringham Christmas Walk is a tradition running over 100 years deep, and that walk is reserved for blood royals. Tom Parker Bowles has zero royal blood. That fact had always been true. What was different now was that someone was finally making it stick. And here's the part that actually gets crazy. There was no press release, no confrontation, no heated family argument that somehow leaked to a tabloid. Just a quiet instruction from William's office that moved through the appropriate channels. And that was that. Done. Now here's what makes this even more significant, because most people don't fully understand what the Sandringham Christmas Walk actually is. This is not a family stroll. Every single person who appears in that walking line sends a message to every royal watcher on Earth about who belongs inside this institution and who does not. William knew exactly what he was denying Tom by keeping him out of that image. He wasn't blocking a Christmas photo opportunity. He was blocking a statement. A very specific, very deliberate statement about belonging. But honestly, and this is the thing you need to understand, the Sandringham exclusion was only the visible layer. What William had actually uncovered by that point was something far more calculated than an ambitious stepmother trying to get her son into a festive tradition. He had uncovered a plan. A real, multi-year, multi-layer plan to insert Camilla's family into the monarchy at 3 different levels simultaneously. 1 layer operational, 1 layer ceremonial, and 1 layer the one that reportedly stopped people cold when they heard it generational. Like, this is where it stops being a family dispute. This is where it becomes something else entirely. So how far had the plan actually gotten before William found out? And what exactly had he been watching build right there inside the institution he was born to lead, while Camilla's team kept telling the world she was just a dedicated queen consort doing her job? Because what he discovered when he finally had the full picture was staggering in its ambition. And what happened next? Nobody saw it coming. Now here's what makes this even more significant. Because to really understand why William moved the way he did, and why he moved that fast, you need to understand what was actually at stake here. And we're not talking about a ceremonial title. We're not talking about Christmas card placement. We're talking about money, access, and the kind of institutional power that most people on the outside never see. Let's start with the Duchy of Cornwall. And look, forget the formal language for a second. Here's what the Duchy of Cornwall basically is. It's a private estate worth approximately £917 million as of 2023. Land, agricultural holdings, property portfolios, commercial interests spread across the country. And it exists specifically to fund the Prince of Wales. When William inherited the title in September 2022, right after Charles became king, he inherited the duchy too, all of it. And the duchy came with staff, with contracts, with layers of operational relationships that had been quietly built up over years. And here's the thing you need to understand about those relationships. Some of them had been put in place by Camilla. The most visible example, and honestly, the one that changes the whole picture once you see it, is Annabel Elliot, Camilla's sister. By the time William inherited the duchy, Annabel had been embedded in an interior design and property management capacity, connected to royal estates for approximately 8 years. Not through a formal appointment that would have been too visible and way too easy to challenge. Through a pattern of consultancy, commissions routed through channels adjacent to Charles's household, interior design, estate presentation, property management recommendations, the kind of work that doesn't attract headlines but absolutely gives you access to spaces, relationships, and institutional decision-making over 8 years. And the total value of those commissions came to approximately £4.2 million. Now, not illegal. That needs to be said clearly. Nothing Annabel did was illegal. But that number tells you something important, because £4.2 million is not someone doing a few decorating favors for her sister's husband. That is a sustained revenue stream built entirely on royal adjacency. And nobody in William's generation had formally reviewed whether any of it was appropriate. And ask yourself this. If Camilla could install her sister into the operational fabric of the Duchy of Cornwall, What else could she install? Who else? If Tom Parker Bowles started appearing at Sandringham consistently, what message did that send to the institution about his status? What doors did normalizing his presence eventually open? Because here's the thing about proximity in the royal world. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with a formal proposal or a signed agreement. It just shows up, consistently, in the same rooms, at the same events, gradually becoming so familiar that questioning it starts to feel like the strange choice. Camilla herself is the proof that this works. She is literally the proof. And the deeper you go into what she was building, the more you understand why William felt like he had absolutely no choice. What was coming next was darker than most people realized. But to truly understand why William could do this without flinching, you have to go back. Because this conflict didn't start in 2024. It didn't start when Charles became king. It started decades earlier. And William was there for all of it. Go back to 1998. William is 16 years old. Diana has been dead for exactly 12 months. And his father is arranging for him to meet Camilla Parker Bowles for the first time. Royal author Christopher Anderson described what that meeting was actually like. And honestly, when you hear it, it stays with you. Camilla was shaking. Visibly, her hands were trembling when William walked into the room. The moment he left, she reportedly reached for a gin and tonic just to steady herself. Now think about what that detail actually tells you. She was nervous because she knew. She knew what this boy had watched. She knew what his mother had gone through. She knew exactly what role she had played in the destruction of that marriage. And she couldn't look a 16-year-old grieving kid in the eye without her hands shaking. And here is the part that honestly turns the stomach. Because in the 12 months between Diana's death in August 1997 and that first introduction in 1998, Charles and Camilla were quietly rebuilding their public relationship. They had been photographed together. They had attended events together. The groundwork was already being laid. And William was watching every single move of it from inside the palace, while he was still in the first year of his grief, while he was still a teenager, while the wound was still completely raw. This is not ancient history. This is a boy processing the loss of his mother, while simultaneously watching the woman connected to that loss being prepared to take her place. Most people remember the public scandal. What most people forget is what Diana actually lost institutionally. It wasn't just a marriage. It was her HRH status. Her security protection, her standing as a working royal. She was pushed to the edges of the institution she had devoted herself to, while Camilla was being quietly positioned to occupy the space Diana was being removed from. William was old enough to understand the mechanism. He just didn't have the power yet to do anything about it. Now here's the thing that genuinely reframes everything in this story. Annabel Elliott's presence in royal property operations didn't begin when Charles became king. It began years earlier while Charles was still Prince of Wales, meaning this was never improvisation. This was never Camilla taking advantage of sudden power. The operational embedding of her sister inside the duchy's world was built during the years when Charles was still heir. A decade of quiet construction before William ever inherited a single thing. And that detail, that's the one that changes everything. Because it means William wasn't just responding to what Camilla did after the crown changed hands. He was dismantling something that had been built while he was still a grieving teenager, watching his mother lose everything. And what Camilla had been building toward the full scope of it was something nobody outside the palace fully understood yet. And this is the detail that stopped me cold when I first understood the full picture. Because Camilla wasn't just pushing at the edges of the institution. She had a plan, a real, specific, multi-layer plan. And honestly, when you lay it out in full, the ambition of it is genuinely staggering. 3 layers, 3 distinct targets, each one individually deniable. Together, an architecture for permanent dynasty insertion. Layer 1, Annabel Elliott and the operational foundation. Camilla's sister had been quietly active in the orbit of royal properties connected to the Duchy of Cornwall for approximately 8 years before William inherited the title. Not through anything formal or visible, through a sustained pattern of consultancy, commissions routed through channels adjacent to Charles's household. Interior design, estate presentation, property recommendations. Work that sounds modest until you add up what it actually represented. Because over those 8 years, the total value of those commissions came to approximately £4.2 million. That is not a sister doing decorating favors. That is a deliberate, sustained financial relationship built entirely on royal access. And it had been running quietly for nearly a decade before anyone in William's generation formally looked at it. Layer 2, Tom Parker Bowles and the ceremonial play. By late 2023, Camilla had begun engineering Tom's visibility at events with royal adjacency. Small appearances at first, cultural functions, charity events where his mother's name opened the door. But the Sandringham Christmas walk was the move that actually mattered. Because appearing in that walking line is not a social gesture. It is a broadcast signal to every royal institution on earth about who belongs inside the family and who does not. According to sources close to William's household, the plan was for Tom to appear at Sandringham for Christmas 2024. Camilla had discussed this directly with Charles, and Charles, and here's where it gets significant, had not said no. Layer 3, and this is the one that reportedly stopped people cold. Tom's daughter, Lola Parker Bowles, born in 2003, making her 21 years old as these events unfolded. She had been placed through careful, consistent social calendar management in proximity to Prince George's extended circle of contemporaries. Not through anything arranged or formal, nothing that could be pointed at directly. Just through the quiet, patient engineering of being in the same rooms. The same events. The kind of presence that gradually normalizes itself until questioning it starts to feel like the strange choice. And George, heir to the throne after William, a genuine social connection there, even just a friendship, would place Camilla's bloodline in orbit of the future King of England for decades. Now look, the strategy was actually pretty clever if you think about it. Each layer operated independently. Each one had a surface justification. Annabelle was a professional consultant. Tom was a son supporting his mother. Lola was a young woman living her life. None of it provable as coordinated. All of it, together, absolutely deliberate. What Camilla miscalculated was William, because by December 2024, 2 weeks before Sandringham, the plan was closer to complete than it had ever been. All 3 layers running simultaneously, and William still didn't have the full picture. But that was about to change. Okay, so here's the part that actually changes everything. Because William had been responding to Camilla's moves individually. The Annabelle situation, he had noticed it. The Sandringham conversation about Tom, he had heard about it. Each one felt like overreach. Each one felt like something that needed to be addressed, but he was treating them as separate problems. 3 individual moments of a stepmother pushing too hard at boundaries that had always been informal anyway. What he didn't have yet was the full picture. The 3 layers as a single coordinated architecture, and the person who gave him that honestly, this is the detail that reframes the entire story, was Princess Anne. Now here's what makes this even more significant. Anne had been watching Camilla's maneuvering for years. Not from the outside, the way royal watchers track these things from the inside. She had noticed the Tom appearances building in frequency. She had heard about the Sandringham conversation between Camilla and Charles. And she had noticed something that William hadn't fully connected yet. The pattern around Lola. In November 2024, Anne had a private meeting with William. The exact contents of that conversation are not public. But what came out of it, according to sources close to both households, was the moment William understood the full architecture for the first time. Not just the Annabelle situation in isolation, not just the Sandringham play as a one-off ambition, but all 3 layers simultaneously, running in parallel, coordinated across approximately a decade, pointed at 3 different levels of the institution at once. And this is where it stops being about a stepmother who wants too much. 1 move is ambition. 2 moves could honestly be coincidence. 3 moves coordinated across 10 years, that's a blueprint. That's not someone improvising with access. That's someone who studied exactly how proximity works, built a decade-long plan around it, and came within 2 weeks of pulling it off. Think about what that actually means for a second. William had been answering individual questions. Anne helped him see that the questions were actually one question, and the answer to that one question required a completely different kind of response. Within days of that conversation, William's legal team ran a formal audit of every commission connected to Annabelle Elliott's work through Duchy-adjacent channels over the preceding 8 years. And the number that came back, approximately £4.2 million, did something important. It turned a pattern into a record. It transformed a feeling into something documented, something institutional, something you could actually act on. Because here's the thing, the wrong move here could be catastrophic. A public confrontation, a leaked briefing, a dramatic family falling out splashed across every front page in Britain. Any of those would turn a private, institutional conflict into something that damaged the monarchy itself. And William, whatever else you want to say about him, is not someone who damages the institution to win a personal battle. He protects it, even when protecting it means protecting it from people inside it. So, the question wasn't whether to act. The question was how to act without giving anyone a target to fire back at. And what he decided to do next was genuinely kind of brilliant. He didn't make a speech. He didn't give an interview. He didn't call a press conference or leak anything to a sympathetic journalist. or arrange a dramatic confrontation that anyone could photograph. He just looked at what had been built, all 3 layers of it, and quietly dismantled every single one. In the same week, without a single public word, 3 moves. Each one targeted at one layer of the scheme. Each one quiet, legal, and permanent. And none of them generated a headline at the time they were made. Move 1: the duchy contract termination. In December 2024, William's office issued a formal administrative instruction through the Duchy of Cornwall's governance structure. No outside consultancy contracts connected to an immediate family member of a working royal above a specified seniority level would be renewed or extended without a full independent review. The specific mechanism he used was a clause within the duchy's own internal governance framework, one that gives the Duke of Cornwall direct authority over all external contracts above a certain value threshold. Annabel Elliott's arrangement fell squarely within that threshold. Her connection to royal property operations ended by January 1, 2025. No announcement. No confrontation, just a contract that quietly didn't get renewed. Move 2: the Sandringham instruction. Issued in the same week. Tom Parker Bowles would not be walking at Sandringham. William communicated this through the appropriate household channels, citing the Sandringham Protocol on eligibility and the tradition's established criteria regarding blood royals. He did not call Camilla directly. He did not raise it with Charles in any confrontational way. Charles was informed through proper channels, and Charles, and this is the weak pivot doing exactly what weak pivots do, did not override it. Move 3: the calendar editorial. And this is actually the one that permanently closes the generational layer. William initiated a quiet review of all social and calendar events within his household's sphere of influence, where consistent proximity between Camilla's extended family and his children might be engineered over time. Not a formal ban, not a dramatic exclusion that anyone could point at publicly. Just a deliberate, sustained editorial control over his family's social calendar. The kind of thing that is entirely within a parent's authority and entirely impossible to challenge through any institutional mechanism. Those intersections simply stopped happening. Now here's what makes this actually kind of brilliant when you think about it. He didn't make one big dramatic move that Camilla could respond to publicly. He made 3 small, precise, legally grounded moves that each dismantled one layer of the plan. And because each move was individually defensible, a contract threshold rule, a protocol upheld, a calendar managed, there was genuinely nothing to push back against, no single target to fire at. And honestly, the Diana contrast matters here. Diana fought her battles publicly. The panorama interview, the speeches, the direct appeals to public opinion, and it cost her everything. William watched that happen up close. He learned the opposite lesson entirely. You don't win by making noise. You win by controlling the institution quietly, permanently, without ever giving anyone a target. The moves were done. The architecture was dismantled, but Camilla hadn't responded yet. And what she tried next? Nobody predicted it. Christmas Day, 2024. Sandringham, Street Mary Magdalene Church. The royal family emerges for the traditional walk. It happens every year. The crowd gathers outside the gates. The cameras line up. The world watches. And the walking line, who is in it, where they stand, how close they are to the center of it, tells you everything you need to know about who belongs inside this institution and who does not. William and Catherine moving together, composed and unhurried. Their children slightly ahead. King Charles, visibly thinner than in recent years but present and steady. The line of senior royals moving past the crowd in the established order. Camilla beside Charles, gracious and composed, doing exactly what a queen consort does on Christmas morning. And Tom Parker Bowles, the man who had been expected in that image by everyone who had been quietly tracking what Camilla was building, is not there. Not absent in a dramatic way. No visible gap where someone should have been. No tension in the line. No awkward spacing that the cameras might catch and turn into a story. Just the royal family, walking, as they always have, as if nothing had ever been proposed and blocked at all. And here's the thing, that seamlessness was completely deliberate. Because the message William was sending was not about absence, it was about normalcy. The image looked exactly as it always had, exactly as it should. Nothing added, nothing disrupted, nothing changed. And that total, undisturbed normalcy was the entire statement. The clip spread within hours, not because it showed anything dramatic, but because people who had been paying attention understood immediately what it meant. Royal watchers who had been tracking the Sandringham question began noting the absence simultaneously. The walking line was replayed, slowed down, every face accounted for, and the conclusion was the same everywhere it landed. The absence was the story. Now think about what each person in that frame experienced in the same moment. What William experienced: confirmation. Not triumph, not visible satisfaction, just the quiet knowledge that the line he had drawn had held. That the image the world was looking at was exactly the image he had decided it would be. What Camilla experienced: she was there. She walked the line. She attended the service. She presented a composed and gracious face throughout the entire morning, but multiple sources described the atmosphere in her immediate household that afternoon as notably tense. She had worked toward a different version of that image for months. And what the world saw was the same Christmas walk it had always seen, because her son was not in it. What Charles experienced, and honestly, this is the complicated one. He walked that line. He was present. He did not intervene. And everyone who understood the situation knew he had the authority to override William's instruction at any point. He chose not to. His presence in that image without acting to include Tom was its own kind of statement. Even if he never intended it as one, nobody announced anything. Nobody made a statement. Nobody confirmed a single thing publicly. The image did all of it, but what was happening inside Sandringham that afternoon, that was a completely different story. Within 48 hours of the Sandringham walk, Camilla's communications team reached out to several royal correspondents. What was offered was described by sources as background context about Tom Parker Bowles' relationship with the royal family, about Camilla's role as queen consort, about the perfectly normal, perfectly warm, perfectly unremarkable nature of the whole situation. This is the standard royal PR playbook. You don't make a direct statement. You don't confirm anything. You flood sympathetic journalists with carefully packaged framing and let the narrative reshape itself around the context you've provided. It works. It has worked for decades inside that institution. Camilla herself is proof of how effective it can be when it's executed well. The problem this time was that the images from Sandringham already existed, and they told a completely different story. No amount of background context could explain why Tom Parker Bowles had been expected in that walking line and wasn't there. Then the Annabelle Elliott situation reached the media. By mid-January 2025, whispers about the duchy contract termination had started moving through royal press circles. And once that story started spreading, the pattern became visible to anyone paying attention. A sister removed from royal property operations. A son blocked from Sandringham. A consultancy arrangement worth approximately £4.2 million quietly terminated without announcement or explanation. The individual pieces were connecting into a single picture. And that picture was not the one Camilla's team had been trying to paint. Her second damage control attempt came through visibility. A series of high-profile public appearances throughout January 2025, clearly designed to project composure and institutional normality. Charity events, hospital visits, a cultural institution tour in central London. The message being broadcast with every appearance was straightforward. I am the queen consort. I am present. I am doing my job. Whatever you think happened, look at me. This is fine. But here's where that strategy fell apart. Because every public appearance Camilla made in January 2025 was now being reported in the context of the Sandringham story. The subtext attached itself to the coverage whether her team wanted it to or not. She had spent years building a public image of resilient, dedicated service. And now every photograph of that service appeared alongside questions about what had just happened to her family inside the institution. The PR machine was running, but it was running directly into the story, not away from it. The specific evidence of collapse came quickly. By late January 2025, Tom Parker Bowles had canceled 3 previously confirmed public appearances with no explanation offered. Annabelle Elliott's name had quietly disappeared from any documentation connected to royal properties. Sources inside Camilla's household described the atmosphere as subdued. And subdued in the carefully managed vocabulary of royal life means they know exactly what happened. They just aren't saying it out loud yet. And then in early February 2025, at a private function, Camilla was reportedly overheard by a staff member saying she had underestimated how far this would go. That is not the quote of an angry person. That is the quote of someone who has completed the calculation and doesn't like the answer. But Charles was still the king. And that card hadn't been played yet. On March 14, 2025, William's office filed a formal operational framework document through the Duchy of Cornwall's administrative structure. 32 pages, dense governance language, almost no media coverage whatsoever. And it permanently closed every door Camilla had spent nearly a decade quietly opening. The document didn't mention Camilla by name, didn't mention Annabelle, didn't mention Tom. It didn't need to. What it established in dry, precise institutional language was a formal governance structure for all external relationships connected to the Duchy of Cornwall. Any consultant, advisor, or contractor connected by immediate family relationship to a working royal above a specified seniority level required a full independent governance review before engagement. No discretionary exceptions. No informal arrangements grandfathered in through prior access. A permanent structural rule, framed to the outside world as simply good institutional housekeeping. The rule named nobody, but it made everything Annabelle had been doing and everything like it permanently impossible. Not by addressing the past, by closing the door on the future, completely, irreversibly, in writing, and then Charles signed it. Now take a moment with that detail, because honestly that is the part that lands hardest when you actually think about it. Charles, the man who had chosen Camilla over every institutional objection his entire adult life. The man who had not overridden William's Sandringham instruction when he absolutely had the authority to do so. The man who had spent 40 years building a life around the woman who was now watching her family be systematically removed from the interior workings of the institution she had worked so patiently to enter. That man put his signature on a document that made it permanent. Whether he fully understood the weight of what he was signing, whether he signed it out of genuine institutional conviction, out of deference to William, out of sheer exhaustion, or simply because it was placed in front of him at the right moment, nobody outside that room knows for certain. But his signature was on it, and his signature is what made it irreversible. Even after Charles is gone, the framework document stays. It exists inside the duchy's governance record. A future king can update it, but no one can pretend it was never there. Then came the image that confirmed it was over. Easter 2025, Windsor Castle. A photograph released from that weekend showed William and Catherine with their 3 children on the Windsor grounds. Behind them, visible and composed, King Charles. Camilla beside him, together, smiling. Looking, to any eye outside the full story, exactly as a family should look at Easter. Tom Parker Bowles was not in that frame. Annabelle Elliott was not in that frame. No one from Camilla's extended family appeared anywhere in it. Just the royal family, defined exactly as William had defined it. Quietly, permanently, without a single press conference or public statement of any kind. Multiple sources present at Windsor that Easter weekend used the same word to describe Camilla's demeanor throughout. Gracious. That word appeared in independent accounts from different people who were there. Gracious, which is the most royal way in the English language of saying she understood it was over. No drama, no statement, just a photograph, and a word, and 32 pages of governance language, with a king's signature at the bottom. Done. When you step back and look at the entire chain of events, what you actually see is something that has been building for approximately 30 years. And it was always going to end exactly like this. Camilla didn't just wake up one day and decide to embed her bloodline inside the monarchy. She spent 40 years watching how royal proximity works, studying it, understanding it at a level most people never get close to. And then she watched it work on herself. She went from being a woman deemed completely unsuitable for a future king, rejected by tradition, rejected by the institution, rejected by the public, to the woman wearing the late Queen's tiara at Charles's coronation. She did that through proximity, through patience, through understanding that the way you win in that world is not through confrontation, it's through being present so consistently that your presence eventually becomes the baseline. And then she tried to run the exact same play for her children and her granddaughter, because of course she did. She had proof it worked. She was the proof. But here's what she got wrong. She ran that play against someone who had watched her run it the first time, from the inside, as a child, while it was actively destroying his mother, and that is genuinely not the same opponent. Now here's the larger thing this story actually reveals, because this was never just about Tom Parker Bowles missing a Christmas walk. This was about what kind of monarchy William is building, and how completely different it is from the one Charles inherited. Charles sees the monarchy as something that needs constant managing, accommodating, compromising, finding space for competing interests and complicated histories. William sees it as something that needs protecting. Those are not the same instinct. And the difference between those two approaches is the difference between what Charles would have done in this situation and what William actually did. The monarchy William is building has harder lines. The distinction between royal blood and royal adjacency is no longer just informal tradition upheld through personal relationships and quiet understandings. It is written into governance documents now. It is codified. It is institutional. It outlasts the people who made it. And that more than anything else that happened in this entire story tells you exactly who William is and exactly what he is preparing to build. For Camilla, she didn't lose her title. She didn't lose her role. She didn't lose her marriage or her position or her place in the walking line at Sandringham. She is still queen consort. She will still attend every state function and every charity event and every public appearance that comes with that position. But her family, the family she spent nearly a decade quietly building toward the inside of the institution, will stay outside. Permanently. In writing. And she cannot change that now. Not with Charles's support. Not with any PR campaign. Not with anything. Because the rules exist. And a king's signature is on them. And Diana, who lost everything to the same mechanism. Camilla just tried to run in reverse. Her son built the wall that makes sure it never works again. That's not politics. That's not strategy. That's 30 years of accumulated weight finally finding somewhere permanent to land. The boy who walked behind his mother's coffin at the age of 15 is now the most powerful man in Britain. And he just made absolutely sure that Camilla's bloodline will never sit where Diana's sons now stand.